you want to learn some new approaches that you can take when you're making trap beats, today I'm going to cover 3 different styles of trap and how you can make them. So the first style that I'm going to be covering is one that I call Arp Trap. This is a style that focuses on a short, repetitive, arpeggiating sound that is used as the cornerstone of the beat. And you can hear this beat that I've created here as an example of this style. By the way, if you enjoy my videos, think about hitting the subscribe button. If you ever get tired of my videos, it's really easy to unsubscribe, but it really does help my channel out. So with this style, this might be a different approach than you're used to seeing. I know that a common approach to making trap is to start off by building out a chord progression, and from there you build out the melody on top of your chord progression. And when a lot of producers make trap beats, they try to push their loops to be as long as possible. But with Arp Trap, our approach here is almost the opposite, where instead of building out an ultra long melodic idea and starting from there, we actually go a different route. And what we do is that we build out a very short repetitive pattern using 1 or 2 instruments. You can see that's what I have built here. And with this approach to making a trap beat, it doesn't really require you to be ultra melodic. With this pattern that I've built here, it's just 3 notes repeating over and over again. And you'll also notice a few other qualities about this sound that are also really important when making this style of trap beat. For one, this sound does do a good job of filling up a lot of space in this beat. In terms of the frequency space of this beat, this one sound does take up a substantial portion of the frequency spectrum. So when doing this style of trap, instead of starting your beat by using a smaller, more passive sound like a bell or a plucked string, it is often a better idea to start with a sound that's far more robust and full. And I'm going to share a quick little bonus tip here for you. If you're having problems getting your sound to fill up the required space and it ends up sitting in a higher frequency space than you need it to, something that I routinely do is that I use halftime, but only partially, as you can see with this mix knob right here. Halftime is a very common tool that people use. This will take your pattern and shift it down an octave and play it at half the rate. But a sneaky little technique that I do from time to time is that I'll use halftime, but bring the mix dial down partially, and you can do this either within the plugin itself, as you can see right here, or you can do this on the mixer level. What ends up happening if you do this is that you get the original layer playing, which sits in the higher frequency space, but now you also get a layer playing at an octave lower, thus filling out those lower frequencies. And the sound that you're using ends up taking up more space in the beat, depending on how much your mix dial is set to. I'll also note playing around with the loop as well as the mode settings right here. This is going to let you control of the timing of this layer as well. This is especially useful when you're using ARPs because it can help you introduce multiple different rhythms within just this one basic pattern. Speaking of effects though, you can see I also use Supermassive on top of this sound right here, which is a free delay plugin. Again, I did this because I need this sound to fill up a lot of space on my beat. So using things like delays and reverbs are going to be really invaluable here. So that's step 1 when making this style of trap beat, building 1 or 2 layers of a short repetitive pattern. But as you can imagine, the issue that can easily happen if we do this is that we end up creating a very boring and repetitive beat with this style of trap. So in order to help with this potential problem, you'll want to go the extra distance with the other elements in your beat. For example, you can see with my 808 pattern right here, it's not as if I programmed this to be highly repetitive as well. I made sure to introduce variation across a longer period of time within this pattern. The idea here is to take your other elements and have them be a bit more varied. And looking at some of the other layers in this beat, you will notice that I have other sounds that sort of come in and out throughout this 4-bar loop here. And additionally, I used my rhythmic layers and created variation along a longer period of time as well. So this is all going to help keep my beat a little bit more interesting. And once I arrange this beat out, I'd probably go the extra mile there as well and include more instances within this beat, little switch ups and ideas that go in and out. This is something that I covered in my video a while back where I showed you different techniques that you can use when arranging your beat. in order to help your beat just sound a lot more interesting by the end and not as repetitive. So that's style number 1, Arp Trap, where you build a beat using an arpeggiating sound as the cornerstone. Let's go ahead and check out style number 2. This is something that I call Noise Trap. This is a style of beat that has a lot of focus put on smaller textures in order to help build out the beat, as you can hear right here. So with the last style of beat that we just covered, you saw that I was able to make a pretty full sounding beat with just a handful of layers. With this style of beat though, you're going to likely have a lot more sounds and samples that you'll use to build out your idea. So if I were to mute some of the common trap sounds like the stuttering hi-hats, the usual snares and kicks, the 808 that you're used to hearing in most trap beats, so you can see when I focus on the additional sounds that I use to build this beat, you can sort of notice that this is where a lot of the work is going to be done if you want to make this style of beat and have it feel complete. So instead of using your typical approach of making a trap beat where you might open up a synth, you'll go through different presets and start writing music, the approach here is to build the beat by using a lot of smaller textures, all with varying rhythms. And those of you that watch my video spotlight on production techniques that Timbaland uses, you know how valuable this technique can be when building out your beat. Now when doing this approach to build out your trap beat, randomly selecting sounds won't work. We need to consider a few important concepts to do this style once again. For one, I chose sounds that sit in a variety of spaces. I have sounds throughout this beat that are sitting in higher frequency ranges, sounds that are sitting in lower and the mids, sounds that are sitting with a lot of stereo presence, some with more mono presence, sounds that are a little bit more further back and others that are a little bit more close in terms of their depth. I just have a good variation of sounds that I'm using to fill up space in this beat. So for me, when I do this technique, I open up my big library of one-shots. I'll start going through the different sounds, but I make sure that they're different than what I've already used in my beat. For those of you that ask where I get my one-shots from, I usually just buy a Splice membership for like a month and then search through for one-shots that sound interesting and unique to me, and then I just download them. Moving on, you'll also notice with this beat that I chose an 808 that has a bit more color than I might have otherwise. The reason being, I also want to use this sound to fill up more space in my beat as well. With this style, we're using a lot of smaller, more transient noises to fill up space, so it can be helpful to use a more colorful 808 as well. 808s are just a lot more of a prolonged sound in your beat, so this will be helpful in filling up a lot of space if you decide to try this style. In terms of how musical you want to get that, it's entirely up to you. There are many beats in this style that do get a little bit more musical. The thing is though, even when they do decide to get more musical, they still use these types of small noises to build out the music rather than an actual instrument. So for example, in this beat, you can see right here, instead of playing the exact same note using this noise over and over again, I chose to jump around and get a little bit more musical. Same thing with this layer right over here. So being a bit more musical with this style can definitely work. The difference here though is that you'll be getting musical using smaller little noises instead of instruments and presets like you may be used to. So that's Noise Trap, the last style that we're going to look at. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. It's the type of trap beat that feels very dark and nocturnal, maybe nighttime trap, I don't know. Let me just play this beat so hopefully you can get a sense of what I'm even talking about, and you can comment down below what you think this should be called. So this approach to making trap beats is distinct in a few different ways. For one, you'll notice that most of the instrumentation that I chose sits in a lower frequency range. If I were to mute the hi-hat as well as the clap, for example, you can see that the frequency readout of this beat sort of tilts towards the lower end. We don't really have many high frequency sounds in this beat. And that's one of the staples of this style, and that's partially how you get that really nocturnal, dark feeling in your beats. When describing different sounds, you've probably heard of higher frequency sounds being described as bright. If a sound is considered bright, it mostly sits in the higher frequency space. And so it stands to reason that the absence of high frequency sounds can help create the opposite effect of brightness. A couple of other really important ideas to creating this style of trap beat. For one, notice how simple and open a lot of my patterns are with this beat. With this layer right here, for example, this is by no means an ultra fast moving melody. It's pretty slow and passive. Same thing with my drums and bass line. I don't have a ton of kicks and extra snares. I tried to be a bit more reserved with my hi-hat pattern as well. I didn't include a ton of stutters. It's pretty straightforward. I know for a lot of newer producers, it can feel like the more hi-hat rolls and 808 slides, the better. But here we don't want to be zany boys. We want to keep it simple and minimal. Another really important concept to consider with this style of beat is that if I were to play the instruments in this beat, you'll notice that they all pretty much have a sense of depth to them. They are pushed back in the beat. What I did was I played around with adding reverbs and delays onto my sounds, but I was also deliberate with the other depth creating concepts as well, like leveling and frequency reduction. This is something that will help you create a bit more of that nocturnal, moody, distant feeling with this style of beat. And I covered this concept in a video a little while back, so instead of just repeating myself here, if you need help understanding how to do this in the best way possible and how to make three-dimensional sounding beats, I'd recommend checking that video out. It should be showing up on the screen right now. If you haven't seen it, it's really helpful for improving your beats. So those are 3 approaches that you can take when making trap beats. If you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Head over to betterbeatmaker.com if you want some more advanced beatmaking tutorials. My free drum kit's available in the description box below, as well as a link to the Discord if you want to join my producer community, and I'll see you guys next time.